Olivia Bennet felt the ring before she saw it. It caught the candlelight in a small, deliberate flash across the table, and for half a second, she thought it was nothing. A trick of the crystal, a stray beam off someone's watch. Then the woman wearing it reached for her water glass, and the flash came again. Unmistakable, a diamond the size of a knuckle sitting on the fourth finger of a hand that had just been introduced to her as Yarin, our family friend. Family friend? Olivia's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Across the table, Jun had gone very still, the particular stillness of a man doing math he didn't want to do out loud. His mother, Manguk, was refilling a water glass that didn't need refilling. His grandmother, Halmoni, seated at the head of the table like she'd been carved into the chair, was watching Olivia's face the way you'd watch a pot to see exactly when it started to boil. Nobody said anything for 4 full seconds. Olivia counted them. Then she set her fork down, folded her hands in her lap, and smiled the smile she used in boardrooms, right before she said something that would ruin someone's afternoon. "That's a beautiful ring," she said to Yarin pleasantly. "Congratulations. Who's the lucky man?" The silence that followed was so total that Olivia could hear the wine breathing in the decanter. Yarin's composure didn't crack, exactly. But something behind her eyes recalculated fast, the way people do when a plan they'd been told was airtight springs a sudden, catastrophic leak. She looked at Jun. Jun looked at his plate, and Byung-ho, at the far end of the table, set down his chopsticks with a click that sounded like a verdict. "Perhaps," he said, in the tone of a man closing a business meeting, "we should have this conversation somewhere more private." Olivia didn't move. "No," she said. "I think we should have it right here." If you're already leaning forward wondering what Olivia just walked into, good. Stay with me because it gets worse before it gets anywhere close to better. Hit subscribe now so you don't lose this one halfway through, and drop a comment telling me who you think is lying at this table, because I promise you, it's not just one person. 6 months earlier, Olivia had walked into a glass-walled conference room in downtown Seoul wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars, and she had not been looking for love. She had been looking for return on investment. Kang Architectural Group was bleeding money in ways its own board hadn't fully admitted to itself yet, and Olivia's firm had a standing rule: never invest in a family business until you've met the family member actually running it day to day. That family member turned out to be a tall, quietly exhausted man named Jun, who walked her through blueprints for a waterfront development with the kind of precision that told her he hadn't slept properly in a week and didn't expect anyone to notice. She noticed. She always noticed. "You're over-leveraged on phase 2, she'd said, tapping the page. "Your numbers assume permits you don't have yet. They'll come through. You're betting your father's company on they'll come through?" Jun had looked up at her then, and something in his face wasn't defensive. It was relieved, like he'd been waiting for someone in the room to finally say the thing everyone else was too polite to say. "What would you do instead?" he'd asked. Nobody in that boardroom had ever asked Olivia that question with actual curiosity, instead of dread. She'd stayed 2 extra hours redrawing his financing structure on a whiteboard, and somewhere between hour 1 and hour 2, evaluating him had quietly become something else. Neither of them had planned for it. That was, in Olivia's experience, usually how the expensive things happened. By the time she said yes to marrying him, 10 months later, she had made exactly one decision about how she'd handle his family. She would not lead with her net worth. She'd spent her whole adult life watching what money did to the way people looked at her, the sudden warmth, the sudden distance, the way people's faces changed the moment a number entered the room. She wanted the Kongs to know her first. The money could come later, if it needed to come at all. She had not accounted for a fiancé, or a ring, or a family that had apparently been keeping a much bigger secret than she'd been keeping herself. "I asked him if it was still active," Yarin said now, into the silence at the table, her voice low and even. "6 weeks ago. He told me it was handled." "It was," Jun said. His jaw was tight. "My father told me the arrangement with the Yuns ended 2 years ago." Every head at the table turned toward Byung-ho. He didn't flinch. That, Olivia thought, was almost more unsettling than if he had. Circumstances changed, he said simply, and picked his chopsticks back up, as if that sentence had settled anything at all. Olivia looked around the table, at Manguk's carefully blank face, at Sora's wide eyes darting between her father and her brother, at Halmoni, who had still not said a single word, who was simply watching. The way a woman watches a fire, she started to see exactly how far it will spread before she decides whether to put it out. Olivia had built a career on reading rooms. She read this one now, fast, and what she read chilled her more than the ring had. Everyone here was performing calm. Nobody here was calm. I think, she said slowly, someone at this table needs to explain to me what circumstances changed means, right now, before dessert. Byung-ho set his chopsticks down again. The port contract with the Yun conglomerate is worth $400 million, he said. It has been worth $400 million since before either of you were engaged to anyone. Chairman Yun made clear 6 weeks ago that the contract's continuation depends on this family honoring its original commitment. Which commitment? Olivia said. Her voice had gone very flat, very even. The voice she used right before she fired someone. My son's marriage to his daughter, Byung-ho said, and looked for the first time almost apologetic. Arranged before June was old enough to object to it. Reaffirmed, apparently, before he was old enough to know it had been reaffirmed. June's hands had curled into fists on the tablecloth. You told me it was over, he said, and his voice cracked, just slightly, on the last word. I told you what you needed to hear at the time, his father said. I did not lie to you, June. I simply did not tell you everything. Olivia had heard a lot of corporate men explain away a lot of ugly decisions with elegant sentences. She had never watched one do it to his own son's face, at his own dinner table, in front of the woman his son intended to marry. She stood up. Every eye at the table followed her. I need some air, she said, and walked out into the garden without waiting to see who, if anyone, would follow. We're barely 1,000 words in, and the whole foundation. Olivia thought she was standing on just cracked open. If this has already got your stomach in knots, comment below with one word for how you're feeling right now. I want to see it flood the comments. Now let's find out exactly how deep this goes. The garden was cold enough that Olivia's breath fogged in front of her, and she was grateful for it, grateful for anything sharp enough to cut through the static in her head. Behind her, through the lit windows, she could see the shapes of the family rearranging themselves at the table, voices rising and falling in Korean too fast for her to follow. She heard the door open behind her before she heard footsteps. She didn't turn around. You could have told me, she said, before I flew across the world to meet a family that already has a marriage picked out for the man I'm supposed to marry. I didn't know, June said. Olivia, I swear to you, I didn't know it was still. That's the problem. She turned to face him now, arms crossed against the cold. It's not that you knew and hid it. It's that you didn't know, and your father let you not know, right up until the moment it was too late for either of us to do anything but sit there and watch it explode in real time. Jun didn't argue with that. He couldn't. I'll fix it, he said instead. How? I don't know yet, but I'm not marrying Yeren. That's not up for negotiation. Not for $400 million. Not for anything. Somewhere behind him, closer than either of them realized, a voice cut in. That's a beautiful sentiment, Yeren said, stepping out from the shadow of the doorway, arms wrapped around herself against the cold. It would mean more if I actually wanted to marry you. Both of them turned to stare at her. I'm sorry? Jun said. Yeren let out a short, humorless laugh. You've spent this entire dinner assuming I'm the villain in your story. I promise you, I have my own story, and you are not the hero of it either. She held up her left hand, the ring catching the porch light. You want to know something about this ring? I picked it out myself. Told my father it was from you so he'd stop asking questions about where I actually spend my weekends. Olivia felt something shift in her chest. Not relief, exactly, but the first loosening of a knot she hadn't realized she'd been holding. You have someone, she said. It wasn't a question. Yaren's carefully composed face cracked, just slightly, for the first time all night. His name doesn't matter right now. What matters is that my father thinks his daughter is marrying into the Kang family to save two conglomerates worth of pride. And the truth is, I would rather lose the port contract, lose the alliance, lose everything, than spend my life married to a man who is in love with someone else, while I'm in love with someone he'll never approve of. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The three of them stood there in the cold garden, breath fogging, each one holding a piece of a puzzle none of them had asked to be handed. "So, the marriage everyone's been panicking about," Olivia said slowly, "isn't wanted by either of the people supposed to be in it." "Not for one single day," Yaren said. "Then what?" Olivia asked, looking back toward the lit windows, toward the shape of Byung-ho still seated at the table like a king who hadn't yet realized his kingdom had already voted against him. Exactly are we all so afraid of? Nobody answered that. But Olivia noticed from the corner of her eye a curtain shift in an upstairs window, and behind it, for just a second, the unmistakable silhouette of Halmoni, watching the garden with the patience of someone who already knew more than everyone currently panicking below her. If you caught that detail, you're paying closer attention than half this family is paying to each other. Like this video right now if you're already picking sides, and stick with me, because the woman in that window is about to become the most dangerous person in this entire story. Dinner did not resume. Mangok sent everyone to bed with the strained efficiency of a woman, managing a disaster she refused to name out loud, and Olivia lay awake in the guest room for a long time, staring at a ceiling carved with patterns she didn't have the energy to admire. She heard, faintly, a soft knock. When she opened the door, Sora stood there in pajamas, holding 2 cups of tea like an offering. "I couldn't sleep either," Sora said, by way of explanation, and handed one over. Olivia let her in. Sora perched on the edge of the bed, blowing steam off her cup, looking younger than her 22 years, for the first time since Olivia had met her. "He didn't tell any of us," Sora said quietly, "about the alliance being reinstated. Not me, not Uma. I don't think even Halmoni knew." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "You don't think, or you know?" Sora hesitated. With Halmoni, it's hard to tell what she knows. She doesn't say things until she wants you to hear them. That's a very diplomatic way of calling your grandmother terrifying. Sora laughed, a real laugh, and some of the tension in the room eased. "She likes you, I think. She said maybe 6 words to me." "That's how you know." Olivia turned the teacup in her hands. "Your father lied to your brother to protect a business deal. Your future sister-in-law doesn't want to marry into this family at all. And I flew across the world to be honest with people who apparently have a family tradition of not being honest with each other." She looked up. "Tell me the truth, Sora. What am I actually walking into here?" Sora was quiet for a long moment. "A family that's been protecting a version of itself for so long," she said finally, "that I don't think anyone here remembers how to just be seen. Not Appa, not Umma, maybe not even June, not really." She met Olivia's eyes. "You're the first person who's walked into this house and refused to perform for it. I don't think anyone here knows what to do with that." Olivia thought about that long after Sora had gone back to her room, long after the house had gone fully silent. She thought about the fact that she, too, had walked in performing, a quieter, better-dressed version of it, but a performance all the same. She had a net worth that could dissolve this family's entire financial crisis with a single phone call, and she had chosen, deliberately, not to say so. She thought, too, about the version of herself who had built that net worth in the first place. The 26-year-old who'd slept on a friend's couch for 4 months after her first firm collapsed, who had learned, in painful increments, exactly how quickly people's warmth curdled into resentment, or grasping the moment they found out what she was worth. She had built her fortune the way some people build fortresses, with the explicit intention of never again being caught without walls. It had worked. It had also, she was beginning to understand, cost her the one skill she needed most right now. In this house, with this family. The simple, unguarded act of letting someone see her before she decided it was safe. She had told herself it was about earning her place honestly. Lying in the dark, for the first time, she let herself wonder if it was actually about something closer to fear. 2,000 words in, and already the cracks are showing in the one person we thought we could trust completely. Drop a comment if you saw that coming. And let's keep going because the next morning is where things start moving fast. Morning brought sunlight, strong coffee, and Byung-ho waiting for her alone in the garden, seated on a stone bench like he'd been there since dawn. "Walk with me," he said, and it wasn't a request. They walked the length of the garden in silence before he spoke again. "You handled last night better than most would have," he said. "Most women would have left on the first flight home." "I'm not most women." "No," he agreed. "I've been making calls this morning, Ms. Bennett. Your firm, your holdings, your name comes up in places that surprised me." Olivia's stomach tightened, but her face didn't move. "Is that a threat?" "An observation." He stopped walking, turned to face her fully. "You are worth considerably more than you have let this family believe. You could resolve our difficulty with the Yun contract with a single signature, and yet you have sat at my table for 2 days, saying nothing about it. I would like to understand why." There it was, the exact conversation Olivia had been dreading, and delaying in equal measure. "Because the second I offer you money," she said carefully, "everything that's happened between me and Jun stops being about whether your family actually wants me here and starts being about what I can do for you. I didn't want that. I still don't." "Admirable," Byung-ho said, in a tone that suggested he did not entirely believe it was that simple. "But dangerous. Silence that looks like humility to you may look like deception to someone watching from another angle." Olivia felt the words land somewhere uncomfortably close to true. "Is that a warning?" she asked. "It's advice," he said. "Free, for once, in this family." And with that, he turned and walked back toward the house, leaving her alone in the garden with a version of herself she wasn't entirely sure she recognized anymore. She didn't have long to sit with it. By mid-afternoon, Chairman Yun arrived unannounced, and the temperature of the entire house dropped 10 degrees the moment his car pulled through the gate. He was a smaller man than Olivia expected, silver-haired, immaculately dressed, with the kind of stillness that made you understand instantly how he'd built an empire. He greeted Byung-ho with the warmth of old friends and old rivals in equal measure, and he greeted Olivia with a long, evaluating look that told her he already knew exactly who she was and had already decided what to do about it. "So," he said over tea, not bothering with pleasantries, "you are the American who thinks she can unravel a 20-year alliance with a wedding invitation." "I didn't come here to unravel anything," Olivia said evenly. "I came here to meet the family of the man I love." "Love," Chairman Yun said the word like it amused him. "Love did not build my company. Love did not build this family's estate, or its name, or the port contract that will determine whether either family survives the next decade intact. Obligation built those things. Love is what young people say when they haven't yet learned the difference." "With respect," Olivia said, "your daughter doesn't want this marriage either. She told me herself." The room went silent, in a way that made Olivia realize, half a second too late, that she had just detonated something she didn't have full authority to detonate. Chairman Yun's eyes flicked, sharp and sudden, toward Yeren, who had gone pale in the doorway. "Is that true?" he said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation waiting to be confirmed. Yeren's chin lifted. For the first time since Olivia had met her, she looked less like a woman managing a performance, and more like a woman about to end one. "Yes," she said. "It's true. I've never wanted this, Appa, not once. I've spent my whole life doing exactly what you asked of me, and I am done pretending that silence is the same thing as agreement." The air in the room felt like it had been vacuum sealed. You will regret this conversation, Chairman Yun said quietly, and it was somehow more frightening than if he'd shouted. Maybe, Yerin said, voice shaking but steady. But I'll regret it as myself, not as a signature on your business contract. We're 3,000 words deep and this family just detonated 2 engagements in one afternoon. If you think this is the worst it gets, I promise you, it isn't. Smash that like button and let's keep pushing forward, because Chairman Yun does not leave quietly, and neither does what comes next. Chairman Yun left within the hour, and the silence he left behind was worse than his presence had been. Byung-ho retreated to his study and didn't emerge for dinner. Mangok moved through the house like a woman holding a structure up with her bare hands, smiling too widely at nothing, refilling tea that no one had asked for. Mangok found her husband in his study an hour later, and though she kept her voice low, Sora, hovering unseen in the hallway, unable to make herself walk away, heard every word through the half-open door. You let our son believe a lie for 2 years, Mangok said in Korean, her voice shaking with something that had clearly been held in check for far longer than 2 years. You let me believe it too. I protected this family, Byung-ho said. That is what I have always done. You protected a contract, Mangok said. There is a difference, and I think you stopped being able to tell them apart a long time before tonight. She was quiet for a moment. Do you remember what you told me, the night before our own wedding? That you would never let obligation choose for our children, what love should choose instead. I believed you. I have believed a great many things you've told me, Byung-ho, and I am beginning to wonder how many of them were true, even when you said them. Everything I have done, he said, and for the first time his composure slipped, just slightly. I have done so that June would inherit a company worth inheriting, so that Sora would have a name that opens doors instead of closing them. You call it obligation. I call it the cost of building something that outlives us. Then you have built something that outlives us at the cost of the people it was supposed to protect, Mangok said. Look at what it has cost tonight alone. Your son doesn't trust you. Yerin's father may never speak to her again. And a woman who flew across the world to be part of this family has spent 2 days deciding whether honesty is even safe here. She opened the door to leave and found Sora frozen in the hallway, caught listening. Neither of them pretended otherwise. Is it true? Sora asked her mother quietly, once they were down the hall, out of Byung-ho's hearing. All of it? 2 years of Appa knowing? Mangok's composure, which had held through the confrontation with her husband, finally cracked in front of her daughter. I don't know anymore what your father knew and when, she admitted. I have spent 26 years choosing not to ask certain questions, because I told myself the answers would only hurt me. I am only now understanding what that choice has cost all of us. Sora reached for her mother's hand, and for a moment, the two of them simply stood there, in the dim hallway, holding on to each other in a house that had just proven, again, how easily its foundations could shift beneath them. Jun found Olivia in the hallway outside the study, staring at the closed door like she could read the argument happening behind it through the wood grain. He's not going to forgive Yerin for that, June said quietly, and my father's not going to forgive himself for losing the contract. Do you think he will? Lose it? I think, June said slowly, that for the first time in my life, I don't actually know what my father's going to do next. That used to be the scariest thing I could imagine. Now it's just Tuesday. Olivia almost laughed, despite everything. It surprised her, the sound coming out of her chest in a house this heavy. Jun studied her face. You're allowed to be scared too, you know. You don't have to be the only calm person in every room. If I stop being calm, Olivia said, I don't know what happens next. I've never actually tested it. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, and for a moment, just a moment, the house felt survivable. That moment lasted exactly as long as it took for Olivia's phone to buzz in her pocket. She almost didn't check it. She wished later that she hadn't. The message was from an unknown Korean number, 3 words long, translated automatically by her phone into English, that still managed to land like a blow. He is here. She stared at it. Who's here? Before John could answer, before either of them could do anything but exchange a confused glance, the front door chime sounded through the house. A visitor, unannounced, at nearly 9 at night. Mangok answered it. Olivia heard her voice change from the hallway, heard the particular note of surprise that meant something had just gone sideways again, and she walked toward the entryway with a growing, sick certainty in her stomach that she already knew somehow, before she saw him, exactly who was standing in that doorway. Taemin looked older than she remembered. 4 years older, to be precise. 4 years since she'd last seen him at a family gathering she'd assumed at the time was a courtesy visit and nothing more. He was dressed simply, travel-worn, holding himself with the stiff formality of a man who had rehearsed this moment on a very long flight. "Olivia," he said, and something in the way he said her name, familiar, aching, entitled in a way she hadn't heard directed at her in years, made the floor tilt slightly beneath her feet. "Taemin." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "What are you doing here? I heard you were engaged." He glanced past her, at Jun, at the unfamiliar house, at all of it, and something in his expression hardened. "I came to remind you that you already are." Manguk was the next to arrive, drawn by the raised voices, still in her housecoat, hair loose for the first time since Olivia had arrived. She took in the scene, Taemin in the doorway, Jun's stricken face, Olivia's stillness, with the particular speed of a mother assessing a wound before deciding how badly it was bleeding. "Who is this?" she asked, though something in her tone suggested she'd already half-guessed. "An old obligation," Taemin said, before Olivia could answer for herself, and something in the phrase, clinical, almost gentle, made it worse rather than better. "One that was never properly closed." Mangok's eyes moved to Olivia, and Olivia braced herself for judgment. What she found instead was something closer to recognition, the look of a woman who had spent her own life inside a house full of half-closed doors and understood, better than anyone else present, exactly how one got left open by accident instead of design. "Come inside," Manguk said finally to Taemin, in the tone of a hostess reasserting control over a room that had slipped out of her hands. "Whatever this is, we are not going to conduct it standing in a doorway at 9 at night like strangers." The silence that followed was the loudest one yet. "What is he talking about?" Jun said, very quietly, from behind her. Olivia felt every eye in the entryway turn toward her, Jun's, Manguk's, Sora's, appearing now at the top of the stairs, drawn by the commotion. She felt, with sudden and total clarity, the exact shape of the thing she had spent 4 years not thinking about closing in around her. "It's not what it sounds like," she said. "Then what does it sound like?" Jun asked, "because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you walked into my family's house and let all of us believe you were the honest one." 4,000 words in, and the woman we thought had nothing to hide just got exposed in front of everyone she was trying to win over. Comment below, do you think Olivia knew? Or is she just as blindsided as we are? Keep watching, because her answer is about to change everything. "I believed it was closed," Olivia said, and her voice, for the first time since she'd arrived in Korea, actually shook. "My family arranged it when I was 19. A family friendship, an old promise, nothing either of us ever treated as real. I told Taemin 4 years ago that I wasn't going to honor it. He agreed. We shook hands. I built my entire life afterward believing that conversation had ended it." "It didn't," Taemin said. "My father never released the paperwork. He kept it filed quietly, in case circumstances ever changed for either of our families. They have. Mine needs this now." "You're telling me," Olivia said, disbelief cracking through her composure, "that for 4 years, a piece of paper I thought was destroyed has just been sitting in a drawer, waiting for someone to need it?" "I'm telling you," Taemin said, "that I flew 12 hours because my family's business is in worse trouble than you'll ever know, and the one thing standing between us and collapse is a betrothal that was never legally dissolved." I'm not the villain here, Olivia. I'm exactly where you are, blindsided by something I thought was already finished. There was an awful, unwelcome symmetry to it that Olivia hated recognizing even as she recognized it. June's face had gone somewhere Olivia had never seen it go. Not angry, exactly. Worse. Quiet. Closed. I need to understand something, he said, and his voice was dangerously even. You've spent this entire trip watching my family hide things from each other. Watching my father engineer a fake crisis. Watching Yaren hide a relationship. Watching secrets stack on secrets until this house nearly came apart at dinner 2 nights ago. And this whole time you had one of your own. Jun, did you know? He said, or did you not? I believed it was over, Olivia said, and hated how small her voice sounded saying it. I swear to you, Jun, I believed it with my whole chest. I didn't lie to you, She stopped, made herself finish it. I never told you it existed at all because I never thought it needed to. And maybe that's its own kind of lie. I don't know anymore. I genuinely don't know. The entryway held its breath. It was Halmony's voice, from the top of the stairs, that finally broke the silence. Quiet, precise, cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk. Everyone stop talking, she said in English, clear and unaccented. The first full sentence Olivia had ever heard her speak in a language other than Korean. Every head turned toward her. You've all spent 2 days performing honesty at each other while hoarding your own secrets like treasure, Halmony continued, descending the stairs slowly, each word landing with the weight of someone who had been waiting a very long time to say them. My son fabricated a crisis to test his own child's loyalty. My granddaughter-in-law-to-be has been secretly seeing a man for a year and letting her father believe otherwise. My grandson kept believing a lie because it was easier than confronting his father. And you, her eyes settled on Olivia, sharp and unreadable, have been sitting in my dining room for 2 days, richer than half the men who've ever tried to marry into this family, saying absolutely nothing about it, while a man from your own past flew across the world to remind you of a promise you never once mentioned. Olivia felt the accusation land, precise and devastating, exactly where it was aimed. I know, Halmony said, because I have known since the moment you walked through my front door and complimented my tea set instead of telling me what it was worth. I have watched you for 2 days, waiting to see if you would ever tell any of us the truth without being cornered into it. She stopped in front of Olivia now, close enough that Olivia could see, for the first time, the exhaustion behind the older woman's composure. You have failed that test tonight, not because of what Taimin revealed, because of how long you waited to reveal it yourself. The words hit harder than anything Byung-ho or Chairman Yun had said in 2 days combined, because Olivia knew, with sick certainty, that every one of them was true. We're past the halfway mark, and the grandmother just called out the one thing Olivia never wanted anyone to see. If this story has you emotionally wrecked right now, that's exactly where it's supposed to have you. Comment your gut reaction below, then buckle in, because the fallout from this moment is about to reshape everyone in this house. Sora, watching from the doorway, waited until the room had cleared before pulling Olivia aside one last time. Halmony doesn't say things like that to people, she said quietly. The thing about respect, I mean. I've known her my whole life. I've never once heard her say it about anyone, not even Appa. I don't feel like I've earned it, Olivia admitted. Not really, not after everything it took to get here. That's probably exactly why she means it, Sora said. You didn't earn it by being perfect. You earned it by finally stopping the performance. I think that's the only thing she's ever actually wanted from any of us. She hesitated, then added softer. For what it's worth, I'm glad it was you who walked through that door 3 days ago. Even with all of it. Especially with all of it. It was, Olivia thought, one of the kindest things anyone in this house had said to her. Not despite the mess of the last 3 days, but because of it. Because Sora had watched the mess happen and decided the honesty underneath it mattered more than the tidiness on top. Nobody slept that night. Olivia sat in the guest room with the lights off, staring at nothing, replaying Halmony's words on a loop she couldn't shut down. You have failed that test tonight. Not the money, not the betrothal itself, the waiting, the choosing, over and over, silence over disclosure, control over trust. She thought about every conversation she'd had with Byung-ho in that garden. Every moment she'd told herself she was being respectful instead of evasive. She thought about the version of herself who'd built a fortune out of nothing and learned brick by brick that information was power and power was safety. And she wondered, for the first time in years, whether that version of herself had quietly become someone she didn't actually want to be. At 3 a.m., there was a knock at her door. She opened it expecting Jun. It was Yerin instead, wrapped in a coat over pajamas, eyes red-rimmed but dry. "I couldn't sleep," Yerin said. "I don't think anyone in this house can sleep tonight." "You could have called," Yerin said, watching her from across the room later that night, once the message had gone unanswered for an hour. "Instead of texting one word and waiting." "Calling felt like asking permission," Yerin said. "I've spent my whole life asking his permission for things I already knew the answer to. I'm done doing that, even in small ways. Even in ways that would have been easier." "Does it feel like winning?" Olivia asked. "No," Yerin admitted. "It feels like standing somewhere new without a map. But it's my somewhere. I've never had one of those before." Olivia let her in, and they sat on opposite ends of the bed like two soldiers comparing wounds after the same battle. "My father hasn't spoken to me since he left," Yerin said. "Not one word, not a call, not a message. I don't know if that's worse than if he'd screamed at me." "I'm sorry," Olivia said, and meant it. "Don't be. I meant every word I said to him." Yerin looked over. "You didn't mean to hurt Jun. I could see that on your face tonight. But you did, and now you have to decide what you're going to do about it, the same way I had to decide what to do about my father." "What did you decide?" "That I'd rather be honest and alone," Yerin said, "than accepted and hidden. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. It might be the only good decision I've made in 10 years. She studied Olivia carefully. "You built a life out of not needing anyone's approval to survive. I think that's exactly why you didn't know how to ask for theirs honestly. You've never had to." The words landed somewhere deep and uncomfortable in Olivia's chest, because they were, infuriatingly, exactly right. Sora found her not long after sunrise, tablet in hand, face pale in a way that made Olivia's stomach drop before either of them said a word. "You need to see this," Sora said, and turned the screen around. It was a photograph, grainy, clearly taken through a car window, of Chairman Yun's vehicle pulling out of the estate's gate the previous afternoon, time-stamped, captioned in Korean beneath a business gossip account with a following in the hundreds of thousands. Sora translated it in a flat, careful voice, like reading it aloud made it more real than she wanted it to be. Alliance between Kang and Yoon conglomerates reportedly collapsing amid family scandal. Sources suggest broken engagement. American, investor involved. "How?" Olivia said, though even as she asked it, she already knew the answer didn't matter as much as the damage. "Staff talk," Sora said. "Drivers talk. In a house this size, someone always talks." She scrolled further, and Olivia watched 3 more posts load beneath it, each one more speculative and more damaging than the last. Comment threads dissecting the Kang family's finances. Old photographs of Yerin and Chairman Yun at formal events recirculated with captions questioning her loyalty. A stray, blurry photo of Olivia herself in the garden, captioned with a guess at her net worth that was, infuriatingly, not far off. "This isn't just gossip," Olivia said slowly. "This is a business story now. Investors read this." "Which means," Sora said, "it's not just my father's pride at stake anymore. It's the company. All of it. Real employees, real contracts, real people who have nothing to do with any of this, and everything to lose if the market decides the Kang name means instability." Olivia felt the shape of the day shift under her, the private wound of the last 2 days suddenly public, suddenly consequential in ways that reached far past the dinner table and the garden and the study where Halmoni had delivered her verdict. This was no longer only about who trusted whom. It was about whether an entire company's workforce would wake up tomorrow to headlines questioning whether their employer would still exist by the end of the quarter. She found Byung-ho already in his study, staring at his own phone with the particular stillness of a man watching a fire he couldn't yet see the size of. "You've seen it," she said. "I have people managing it," he said, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. "Statements, legal responses. It will not be enough. These things rarely stay contained once they've started." "Then let me help contain it," Olivia said. "Properly, publicly, not as a rescue, not as a secret arrangement nobody understands the terms of, as a real, transparent statement about a real, transparent partnership between our companies, announced on our terms before anyone else gets to write the story for us." Byung-ho looked up at her, and for the first time she saw something in his face that wasn't calculation. It was closer to exhaustion, and beneath the exhaustion, something that might have been gratitude he wasn't yet ready to admit to. "Half a day ago," he said, "I told you that silence looked like deception. I did not expect to be asking you, this quickly, to help me speak louder instead." "People rarely do," Olivia said. "Get your legal team on the phone. I'll get mine. Let's write something true before someone else writes something false." In the morning, Olivia found Taemin alone on the back terrace, drinking coffee he clearly hadn't slept enough to properly enjoy. She sat down across from him without asking. "I owe you an actual conversation," she said. "Not the version I gave everyone in that entryway." Taemin set down his cup. "I'm listening." "I meant what I said 4 years ago," Olivia said. "I didn't want that arrangement. I don't want it now, but you flew across the world instead of calling, which tells me this isn't really about me at all." He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, the performative formality had drained out of his voice entirely. "My father's company is 6 months from bankruptcy," he said. "He's been telling investors, quietly, that a marriage alliance with your family's holdings would stabilize us. I told him it was insane. I told him you'd never agree to it. He sent me anyway, because he's out of better ideas, and because I am, apparently, the only leverage he has left." Olivia felt something in her chest loosen, just slightly. Not because the situation had gotten easier, but because for the first time since he'd walked through that door, she recognized the exhausted, cornered person in front of her instead of the threat she'd braced for. "You're not here because you want to marry me," she said slowly. "I'm here," Taemin said, "because I didn't know what else to do, and old obligations are easier to lean on than new solutions." He met her eyes. "I don't want this marriage any more than you do, Olivia. I never did. I think some part of both of us has known that since we were 19. "Then let's end it properly this time," Olivia said. "On paper, in front of witnesses, so no one's family can ever pull this card." Again, for the first time since he'd arrived, Taemin actually smiled, tired and real. "I'd like that. I think I've been waiting 4 years for someone to actually say it out loud instead of assuming it was already understood." Manguk found them there an hour later, drawn out by the smell of coffee gone cold and the sound of 2 people talking. In the low, careful register of a conversation neither wanted overheard. She didn't retreat. She sat down at the end of the table instead, folding her hands, and looked at Taemin with an expression Olivia hadn't seen her wear before. Not hostility, but the particular sympathy of a woman who understood exactly what it meant to be sent somewhere by a father's desperation rather than one's own choosing. "Your mother," Manguk said carefully, in accented but careful English. "She is well?" Taemin looked up, startled by the question's gentleness. "She doesn't know I came," he admitted. "She would not have allowed it. She has always said obligation makes cruel decisions look reasonable if you dress them formally enough." "Your mother sounds wise," Manguk said. "She usually is. I don't always listen." Manguk almost smiled. "That," she said, "is apparently a family trait that crosses oceans." She glanced at Olivia. "For what it's worth, I do not think either of you came into this house wanting to hurt anyone. I think you both came carrying weight that was placed on you before either of you had the chance to put it down. That is a different thing than deception, even if it costs the same amount of pain to the people standing nearby." It was, Olivia thought, the closest thing to absolution she'd been offered since the ring had first caught the candlelight 3 days earlier, and she found she hadn't realized how badly she'd needed to hear it until Manguk said it. We're deep into the emotional core of this story now, and two of the biggest threats in this entire house just turned out to be exhausted people looking for a way out, not villains looking for a fight. If that surprised you, let me know in the comments. And stay with me, because Jun still hasn't forgiven Olivia, and that conversation is the one that actually decides how this ends. Jun was harder to find, and harder still to talk to once she found him, down by the water's edge at the back of the property, skipping stones with the kind of controlled violence that told her exactly how much restraint he was exercising just to stand still. I closed it, Olivia said, coming to stand beside him. Formally, Taemin and I are drafting the dissolution today, with lawyers, with witnesses, with everything your family needs to see it's real. Good, Jun said, and threw another stone, hard, watching it skip 4 times before it sank. That's it? Good? What do you want me to say, Olivia? He turned to face her, and for the first time she saw real hurt behind the anger, not just wounded pride but something raw. You watched my family come apart for 2 days over secrets. You sat there, quietly judging every one of us for what we were hiding, while hiding something of your own the entire time. I wasn't judging you. Weren't you? Even a little? His jaw tightened. You've had this look since you got here. Like you were waiting to see if we'd earn your honesty. Like the money, the past, all of it was something we had to qualify for before you'd hand it over. Olivia opened her mouth to argue and found, to her own surprise, that she couldn't. Because it was true. She had been waiting, testing, in her own quiet way, exactly as much as this family had been testing her. You're right, she said instead, and the words cost her something to say. I've spent my whole adult life deciding what people deserve to know about me based on how well they'd already proven themselves. I told myself it was wisdom, self-protection. But watching your grandmother call it out last night, watching how much it actually cost everyone in this house that I waited, I think it was just fear wearing a nicer outfit. June said nothing, but he wasn't throwing stones anymore. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now, Olivia continued. I'm telling you I understand, finally, what your grandmother meant. It was never about the money or the betrothal. It was about whether I'd ever choose to be known instead of just managed. And I didn't, not until it was forced out of me. She took a breath. I don't want to build a marriage on that habit. I don't think you do either. Jun turned to look at her fully for the first time since the confrontation in the entryway. Then what do you want to build it on? He asked, quiet, genuinely asking. I don't know yet, Olivia admitted, but I'd like to find out. Honestly, this time. Starting now. He didn't answer right away. He looked out at the water for a long moment, and Olivia let him, understanding, finally, that some silences needed to be earned rather than filled. There's a difference, he said eventually, between someone who lies to protect themselves and someone who spent so long protecting herself that she forgot lying, and silence could ever look the same from the outside. He turned back to her. I believe you didn't mean to deceive me. I need you to understand that not meaning to isn't the same as not doing it. I understand that now, Olivia said. I don't think I understood it 3 days ago. 3 days ago, June said, I would have told you I knew exactly who you were. I'm not sure that's true anymore. I think I knew the version of you that had already decided what to show me. I'd like to meet the rest, if you're willing to stop deciding that on your own. Olivia let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. That might take longer than 3 days. I'm not in a hurry, Jun said. I've just spent 3 days learning that the things worth having usually take longer than you'd like. We're closing in on the ending now, and this is exactly the moment where most stories would let the couple hug it out and call it resolved. This one doesn't, because there's still one conversation left, the one that started this whole story, and Halmony isn't finished with either of them yet. If you've made it this far, comment below and tell me you're still here. I want to see this thread full before we get to the ending. That evening, Halmony summoned them both to the study. Not a request this time, but a formal invitation delivered by Sora with the gravity of a court appearance. Byung-ho was there too, along with Mangguk, seated in careful silence, and for a moment Olivia felt the full weight of the entire family gathered to render a verdict. Halmony sat at the center of the room, hands folded, and looked at Olivia for a long moment before speaking. "I have watched 3 generations of this family choose strategy over honesty," she said. "My husband did it with his business partners. My son did it with his own child. I have done it myself, more times than I would like to admit, in the name of protecting what we've built." She paused. "There was a winter, many years ago, when I did not speak to my own sister for 11 months over a disagreement neither of us could remember clearly by the time we finally spoke again. I tell you this, not because it is a pleasant story, but because I recognize the shape of what almost happened in this house this week. Silence is easy to mistake for peace. It is rarely the same thing." She paused. "I did not test you to embarrass you, Olivia. I tested you because I needed to know whether you would become one more person in this house choosing performance over truth. For 2 days, the answer was yes." Olivia held her gaze and didn't look away, though everything in her wanted to. "And today?" Olivia asked. "Today," Halmony said, "you told my grandson the truth without being asked twice. You closed a door you'd left open out of fear, and you did it in front of witnesses instead of quietly, where no one could hold you to it." Something in the old woman's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, into something that might have been respect. "That is not nothing. It is, in fact, the only thing that has ever mattered to me in this entire ordeal." Byung-ho cleared his throat. "The Yoon contract," he said, "is likely lost. Chairman Yoon will not easily forgive his daughter's defiance, or mine for allowing it to happen under my roof." "Then we'll survive without it," June said, before Olivia could offer what she was already quietly calculating in her head. The exact resources, the exact structure that could replace what the family stood to lose. She caught herself before she said it. Waited. Watched. "There's another option," she said instead, carefully, watching Byung-ho's face. "Not a rescue, a partnership, if your family wants one, structured properly, transparently, with terms we negotiate honestly instead of one I simply hand over, because I can afford to." She looked at June. "If that's something you want, not because I'm trying to buy my way into this family, because I think, done honestly, it might actually be good business." Byung-ho studied her for a long moment, and something in his controlled expression finally, fully softened. "That," he said, "is the first thing you've offered this family that felt entirely like the truth." 6 months earlier, June said quietly, once Byung-ho and Mangguk had left the study and it was only the 2 of them still standing near the window. "If you'd told me I'd be standing here, engaged to a woman my family had put through something like this, I would have said you were describing someone else's life. I keep thinking about that boardroom. You caught every flaw in my numbers in 20 minutes. I don't know why I assumed a person that precise about spreadsheets would be simple about everything else." "I'm not simple about anything," Olivia said. "I don't think I know how to be. I'm working on it." "Good," June said. "I'd rather have complicated and honest than simple and curated. I just needed a few days to understand the difference." Halmony, watching the exchange, allowed herself the smallest, driest smile Olivia had seen from her yet. "Perhaps there's hope for this house after all," she said. "We're almost at the finish line, and everything that's been building for the last 9,000 words is about to land in one final scene. If you've stayed this long, you already know this isn't going to be a neat, easy ending, because nothing about this family has been easy. Like the video, drop your final prediction in the comments, and let's finish this together." The statement went out the next morning, jointly signed, jointly worded, every sentence negotiated between 2 legal teams, and, unusually, both families in the same room until the language satisfied everyone, rather than protected any single one of them. It did not deny the broken engagement. It did not pretend the last 3 days had been smooth. It said, plainly, that two families had chosen honesty over an outdated arrangement, that a new partnership was being structured on transparent terms, and that the businesses involved remained solid, watched over by people who had, if anything, just proven how seriously they took the difference between appearance and truth. The market noticed. The gossip accounts, deprived of a scandal to feed on, moved on to someone else's crisis within a week. But inside the house, something steadier and slower had shifted, something no press release could have manufactured on its own. 3 weeks later, the estate hosted a much smaller gathering than the one Olivia had first walked into. No arranged fiancés, no chairmen brokering marriages like merger agreements, no fabricated crises hiding behind formal dinners. Just family, and the people who had chosen, finally, to be honest with each other about what that word actually meant. Yeren arrived with a man Olivia hadn't met before, introduced simply, without ceremony, as someone she loved. Chairman Yun did not attend. Yeren didn't flinch when his absence was mentioned. She'd made her peace with the cost of her own honesty weeks earlier, in that cold garden, long before anyone else in the house had caught up to her. Taemin sent a message from Seoul that morning, a short one, warmer than Olivia expected, wishing her well, signing off with something that sounded, for the first time in 4 years, like actual closure instead of obligation. Chairman Yun did not call, not that week, not the next. It was 3 weeks later, the same day of the small gathering at the estate, that a single message arrived on Yeren's phone. No apology in it, no softening, just a line asking whether she was happy, and whether happiness had been worth what it cost her father's pride. Yeren read it twice, showed it to no one but Olivia, and typed back a single word. Yes. She did not receive a reply. She told Olivia she hadn't expected one, and that for the first time in her life, not receiving one didn't feel like losing. Halmoni sat at the head of the table, exactly where she always sat, watching the room with the same sharp, patient eyes she'd had since the night everything came apart. But there was something looser in her posture now, something that might, in a woman less careful with her expressions, have been called peace. Mangguk, who had watched her husband build an empire out of careful silences, found herself thinking often, in the weeks that followed, about how much smaller a house could feel once the people in it stopped guarding every door. She said as much to Byung-ho one evening, the two of them alone on the terrace where Chairman Yun had once delivered his ultimatum over tea. He didn't answer right away. When he did, it wasn't the answer of the man who had sat across from Olivia in the garden 2 months earlier. "I built this family the only way I knew how to build anything," he said, "by controlling what could be controlled and hiding what couldn't." He looked out at the water. "I am 63 years old, Mangguk. I did not expect, at this age, to be taught something new about my own children by a woman my son met in a boardroom." "None of us expected it," Mangguk said. "That may be exactly why it worked." June found Olivia in the garden afterward, in the same spot she'd retreated to on that first terrible night, and this time he didn't hesitate before reaching for her hand. "You know," he said, "you never actually apologized properly. Not the real kind." "I'm sorry," Olivia said, and meant every syllable of it. "For all of it. For thinking silence was the same thing as safety. For making you and everyone in this house prove yourselves before I'd give you the truth I should have offered freely." She squeezed his hand. "I'm not going to promise I'll never be guarded again. That's not honest either. But I promise you'll never have to find out what I'm hiding from someone else, in an entryway, in the middle of the worst possible moment. If I'm carrying something, you'll hear it from me first. Always." Jun studied her face for a long moment, and whatever he found there seemed to settle something in him that had been unsettled since the night the ring caught the candlelight. "That," he said, "is the only kind of promise I actually want from you. Behind them, through the lit windows of the house, laughter drifted out into the cold night air. Sora's, bright and easy, Mangok's softer beneath it, even faintly, something that might have been Byung-ho's rare, dry chuckle. A family that had spent generations perfecting the art of protecting itself from the truth was, slowly, awkwardly, learning an entirely different skill: how to survive being fully known. Olivia looked back toward the house, toward the warm lights spilling out across the garden where this whole story had begun, with a diamond ring and a stranger's smile, and understood, finally, that belonging had never been a competition to win. It had only ever been a truth she had to be brave enough to tell, not once, in a single grand confession, but again and again, in small, ordinary moments like this one, for as long as she wanted to stay standing in this garden with someone who had, against every instinct she'd spent a lifetime building, finally been allowed to see all of her. If this story hit you the way I think it did, this is exactly the moment to hit subscribe, drop a comment telling me which character you understood the most by the end, and share this with the one person you know who needs to hear that honesty is always harder and always better than the performance of it. Thank you for staying until the very last word. I'll see you in the next one.